Hi, I'm Sharon Doering, the author of Confess to Me, and you're enjoying The Thriller Zone with David Temple.
Say hallelujah.
Did I do okay?
It was perfect. It was perfect.
Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. Let's talk about you, young lady. Okay, now, and I'm sure you go through this a million times, but bear with me because I find it fascinating, as our listeners will. I get, it's clear that you're a brainiac, and I mean that in all the best ways. It's clear you're a brainiac. You're smart, and you're funny. This book is as scary as it is and as disturbing as it is, it's still funny. So your sense of humor, I applaud. So you've been a science professor, a biotech stock analyst, but my favorite, and you know I had to research it because I'm a nerd, probably kind of like you a little bit, xenotransplantation plantation researcher. Now I thought to myself, okay, let's break that down. Xenotransplantation. So it's going to be, you're going to transplant or implant or infuse. So what would you be doing? Okay, let's see. Human recipient of cells, tissues, organs from a non-human animal and to an animal. So why would one be doing that? Let's just.
So just because they use, so for different surgeries, they can use animal parts. So they used, and I was doing this in the late early 2000s. They use like pig valves and different things in the human, different components like in surgeries and heart surgery. And that's what the team I was on. So I was just in the laboratory working on how to not set off the immune response. Like there's the whole immune system cascade of reactions for rejecting an organ. So we were working in the lab, and then there were surgeons on our team too, who were, going and doing the surgeries where they were, and this was experimentation. This was just with blood and pigs. They weren't involving humans at this point because they needed to test it. And actually the funny thing is they asked me like, hey, do you want to come watch these surgeries? And I was like, I don't know, I was lazy or something. I'm like, nah. And in hindsight, I'm like, I should have went. That would have been really cool. But so it's all so that the host doesn't reject those organs. So they're just, figuring out how to get, humans to not reject these pig parts. And it's the interesting thing actually is they don't use like chimps and, closer relatives to us because we share more viruses with them. So it's riskier.
Oh,
It's pretty interesting. They use pigs because they're close enough, but they're not close enough that there's this risk for virus jumping.
Gotcha. Oh,
is it so fascinating jumping. Or so boring?
No, I find it fascinating because look here, first of all, number one, impressive. Number two, kind of rife with creepy factor. But number three, mostly, are you going to use that expertise in a future book?
Probably not that one. I don't know. It just sounds fun on a bio. Like, what the heck is that?
Well, you know what it sounds, it reminds me of one of my favorite authors of all time. And one of the guys who really kind of tickled that bug in my brain to make me want to write is Michael Crichton.
Yeah, he was so good. I mean, like his ideas and actually how he was able to manifest these ideas, these very profound or complex science ideas and just make them just super fun and totally accessible. That's pretty amazing to be able to do that.
Well, I guess I should say by now we're on with Sharon Doering, and she is she's a Chicago native. As you notice, I'm probably going to keep all this because I really like all this stuff. Chicago native, master's degree in biotech from Northwestern, a tiny little school, very few people have heard about. But so all this science aside, how did you one day go, okay, let's do this. Let's forget masters, biotech, xenoplantationology, I want to write. I want to write creepy thrillers, psychological torment.
I guess, so I got into science because I liked studying it and I liked learning these different ways of analyzing things and thinking. But then once I got into a science job, I didn't like it as much. So I was working as a biotech stock analyst, and it was like the late 90s. And I really didn't like it. And it was kind of one of my early jobs. And I think that if I was maybe a little bit older when I started this job, I would have been able to stick it out because it,
Yeah.
it's like good money and stuff like that. But I was maybe too like young and like, I want to do what I want to do. And this isn't a good job and I don't like it. And it was, it was also it was a weird time. It was a small brokerage firm. And I just didn't like the atmosphere. And so I started really reading as an escape. And I always read, but I didn't like read, like all the time. So I started as an escape. And then also at the same time, I was writing these stock reports. And the only part of my job that I loved was the writing. And I would like write these reports that were supposed to be, pretty dry. And I would like add all these things to them. And my boss is like, no, you can't write that. Like, no, like cutting all this, like, the voice out of it. And I'm like, I really like writing. So it kind of, I was just kind of dopey about it. Like, I didn't realize that I would, I didn't realize like you could be a writer. I didn't know anyone who was a writer. And so I just kind of realized slowly, it took me a while to realize, oh, I really like writing and I really like reading. And I'm going to try writing some short stories for fun. So early on, the goal was always, can I get it published? But, it's not like the total goal because, it takes a really long time for most people. It took super long for me. It was just so fun. Like that moment I sat down and wrote my first short story, it was just like magical. You know what I mean? That like,
Oh, sure.
just like, it's a blast. And I knew, I'm going to do this, regardless of what happens. And then it took me like 20 years
Oh,
to get a book out. It took me a long time.
well, now, is that because you married 3 kids, raising kids, and going to school and teaching and all of that, or because, and this is a specific question, because a lot of, I've run into this in my career, finding people who go, I've got this story that I've been working on. Really? How long? About 27 years, but I think I'm almost there. And I'm like, 27 years? One story? Well, yeah, it's 279,000 words. I might have to trim a little bit to get published. So my question is, were you, I'm assuming you were keeping a notebook, honing your skills. Did you self-publish it all in the meantime?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, part of it is I'm just slow, right? And I was working and stuff like that. But part of it is I'm slow. But I wrote like several dozen stories. I got just a couple of them published in like real small magazines. Nothing like, I was so impressed with myself, but nothing you've heard of and nothing that's around anymore, And then I tried writing a novel and it was no good. And then I tried writing another novel. My first novel I tried writing was horror, no good. Second one was romance. It was like awful. It was awful.
Wait. Why was it awful? Why?
Because I couldn't. Oh, okay. So this is kind of a funny question. Actually, this is a great question. I've never answered this question. It was awful because it did not fit with what a romance reader is looking for. It was like way too funny and like disgusting. Just like, it was too strange. It was too strange for romance. So it should never be seen. And also it was the second book I wrote. And then the third book I wrote was a crime novel, just like a PI novel. That was the thing at the time. And I was reading a ton of Dennis Lehane.
Oh yeah.
So I tried that and that one was decent. I sent it out and, it got like a couple of good comments, but just, rejection. And then I wrote a biotech thriller and I got an agent with that biotech thriller. And she tried to sell that one and a second one and a third one, and they didn't sell. And I did self-publish too for a short period of time. Okay, then I'll get back to that. But then when I wrote this like psychological thriller, and it sold, it sold to a publisher, and we kind of just bounced around the idea of, do we want to take those other thrillers off and launch me like as a debut? So I did. I took them off. I mean, they didn't do anything anyways, because you have to have marketing strength, right? If you
Right.
really want to put yourself out there, self-publish, and I don't have marketing strength. So they just sat there because I didn't, because I was like, how much time do you have?
Right. Right.
So that's why it took like 20 years to get, a contract for me, because it was just a ton of rejection along the way, and I'm slow.
Well, let me ask you this. So is it Crichton, isn't it? Titan books.
Titan, yeah. They're in
Titan's
the UK.
UK, right. So, so your first book that was published is, well, I have it here.
It's this one.
Yes, She Lies Close. There you go. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for holding that lovely prop, Vanna.
I've got all my books just right handy.
But standalone, like this one, I'm assuming. This,
Yes, yeah.
This is not a sequel to that. So what was the magic? Who was the person that picked up that book and said, that manuscript, and said, oh, Sharon, you got something here?
Okay, so my agent, who read my 3 biotech thrillers and who liked them. I mean, she picked, she signed me because she liked them, but she couldn't sell them. And part of that is like everything, like a little bit of luck, maybe like they weren't quite there yet. Who knows, but then I said, well, I'm working on something different. And I sent her this, and I don't contact her much, and I'll like talk to her once a year, and I'm like, okay, I've got something for you, and I sent her this, and she really liked it. She's like, what? Why haven't been you've been doing this all along, these psychological thrillers. So, and actually, even the She Lies Close, it took a while to sell it. She sent it to a couple people, and they said it was too dark, and it actually was really the first draft, it wasn't the first draft, but not this product, an earlier story, it was really dark. And so I changed it up, used their feedback, and then, she sent it out again, and we got different feedback, and then, she sent it out again, and it got picked up by the editor there. She loved it.
I gotta ask, just because I'm nosy. It's some people call it curious. I'm just flat out nosy. What do you think? First of all, you said it was really dark. How did the degree of darkness change from iteration 1 to the one that got published?
Okay, it's very specific. So the one that got published is still really dark. It's like dark humor, and it's pretty dark. But the first draft that everyone was like, no, I had to step away from it. I had to step away from it. It had like journal entries from somebody who was like really messed up, and this criminal. So it had their journal entries, and people were like, no. I started reading the journal entries, and I had to stop. I don't know why it doesn't, like, when I'm reading dark stuff, I'm like all in. I'm not like I don't know why it doesn't bother me. I don't know.
Well, I guess I wonder, and I thought about this a number of times, especially since a psychologist is doing a narration of sorts at the beginning of several chapters. I wonder, oh, does poor Sharon have psychological problems? Bless her heart, she is just a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Maybe people, I mean, both of my books are a little bit crazy, but I guess that's just what I find. It's so fun to write. I mean,
sure.
And also, I guess like I have a natural instinct to kind of just anybody I meet, to just assume they have like a dark side or like, things they don't share and stuff like that. And so
Sure.
that's my natural thing. So I always go dark.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I do like, the psychology in this is here for a particular reason. I can't really say why, because it's a spoiler.
Right.
But there's no psychologist in the first book. The psychologist in Confess to Me
Oh, yeah. Okay.
is there for a reason. And it had to do with like what inspired the story was this like true story I had heard involving psychologists. And
Yeah, it would be a huge spoiler alert to talk too in depth about it, so I'll try to dance around it. But what I was fascinated by, there's a couple things I was fascinated by, and I've made some notes here.
oh, that's so fun. Thank you.
In this lovely Confess to Me on
I'm
sale
so
now.
I'm so flattered that there's notes.
Oh yeah. Oh no. Now, and they're color coded because the green one here has to do with psychological. Here it is. So when I started reading about multiple personality disorder, this isn't giving anything away. It's a common thing in psychology. I'm fascinated by this. In my first book, oh geez, I wish I had been ahead mind so I could pull it up and go, but this isn't about me. My first book, The Pose, are available now on Kindle. I used this a lot, and I think it turned into dissociative disorder, if I'm not mistaken. I may have.
Yeah, they changed it. They changed it in the manual.
Yeah.
In the psychological manual.
Oh, the fact that one person can literally inhabit multiple people, so to speak, is fascinating to me. The fact that I secretly think there are a lot more people walking the planet that suffer from this than we care to think about. But it did make me, you pulled me in there. And when I first saw some entries that I kind of referenced earlier in the book, and I was like, what is that about? A little bit later, oh, there it is again. What's that about? And it was about the third one. I went, oh, ding dong, is anyone home? And that's when it clicked, and I'm like, oh boy, now you've pulled me in a different level. So there's a couple things I want to. Oh, first of all, this is a question because we're talking about darkness. What does the three children think about mommy being a psychological thriller writer? Sorry, Freudian slip.
Okay, so this is funny. Okay, so my oldest, he's not really into. Well, none of them are impressed, like at all. Like we were actually at I forced them to go into Barnes and Nobles with me the other day.
Yeah.
And I asked my oldest, my 17-year-old, to record me. And I'm like, both my books are on the table. And he's like, wait, you have two? He did not know I launched a book last month. He did not know. So that's like kind of like where we're at, but with him. And so he's not really into reading. I've always had to push him to read. So he's got no interest in reading. My second child, who's 16, asked me like, hey, it was kind of sweet. He's like, hey, can I read your books? And I'm like, well, you're too old for me to tell you, like, you can't read a book. But I'm
Right.
like, I really would not read it. I would strongly advise you. I said, do not read it. I'm like, I can't force you. You're your own person. You're 16. But I would strongly advise you not to read it because there's like explicit sex and language. And like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to like like seems too creepy to be reading like explicit sex and language written by your mom. So I said I would hold off.
Yeah.
And my youngest, I said they're horror. They're not horror, they're psychological thrillers. But I said they're horror, you can't read them. So that's where we're so I've advised everybody to not read them.
And how old is the youngest?
9.
Okay, so you don't have to worry about this at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I think a little dash of naughty language and sex is good, but not until
But
you're
written by
18.
but reading it from your mother.
Yeah, yeah.
You can
I'm
read
trying.
somebody else's sex and violence.
Yeah.
Don't read it from your mother.
Okay. Well, speaking of sex, and I even have little cue words for me. Okay.
Yes.
I love, these are not long. They're just tiny little highlights. And I do this a lot. Meg Gardner, when I first started reading Meg Gardner, who will be a guest on an upcoming show, I would do this. She would turn a phrase a certain way, and I'm like, Jesus, how does she do that? It's just so beautiful. So here's one of yours that I love. Get in a romantic mood, would you? I wanted to cover her mouth with mine and never let either of us come up for air. I wanted to bite her bottom lip because it was too soft, too irresistible. And when her blood mingled with my saliva, it would taste like communion.
Thank you. I'm flattered that you like it.
That is tasty. It's sexy, but it's not. Even your sex, by the way, even your sex, and I had this comment. Your sex, while steamy, is not like it's not like romance novel writer,
Right.
which that's not a diss on romance
Right.
novelists, because I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, yeah, it's just a different genre and a different expectation. Yeah.
Exactly. But you give just enough. And it really is kind of tantalizing. And I find it interesting. I'm driving yesterday, I'm taking my wife out to dinner, and I said, I gotta tell you something, honey. And take this in a great way, because it's all good, by the way. Everything is good with me. All good. I said, I think it's very interesting. I read May Cobb's book, The Hunting Wives.
Oh, that was amazing.
Holy
yeah.
shit, that was good.
Yeah.
And there is a little fascination with the main character, who has a little bit of a girl crush. Female protagonist has a girl crush.
Yeah.
And I saw a similar thing happen in a book. Oh, I don't know. I can't think of the book right now, but it'll come to me later. Oh, Confess to Me. And there was a similar thing there. And I was like, and I turned to him, I said, and I'm driving. This is driving, by the way.
Yeah.
Honey, I don't know why people always do this. Like, I know what driving looks like.
I don't do this.
And who does this?
It's like, where are you going? Like, whoa. It's just like this.
Yeah, it's like
pretty
this,
much, or like
maybe like
one
this.
hand.
Yeah. Maybe. Or you're just doing this. You could just do
Yeah,
the link.
it's hopefully it's not like this.
Yeah, because if you're doing this, then you're like
you're in trouble.
You're a NASCAR driver. But anyway, I digress. And I said, is this a thing? Is this a thing? And she looked at me like, is what a thing? It's being in a marriage, but having this little bit of a, mental fantasy, a thing. She goes, not with me. And I'm thinking to myself,
are you being honest with me?
And I said, are you being honest with me? Were you there? Were you in the back of the car? Don't make me pull this thing around. No. That's
so funny. You know what? It served the book. There's none of that in my first book, although my first book does have more, the sex is more explicit. There's more of it. It like has more of a role in exposing the characters in the story. In this book, gosh, I don't think that was there as much in the first draft, but it served the story. It served the story and it served the characters. And the funny thing about sex scenes is that I find them very useful at exposing the character. Like really, you know what I mean? These things that, there's things that you talk about with people and there's things that you don't. So any type of vulnerabilities or shame or different things, it's a very effective way to expose that. And so, gosh, I'm trying to think like, you know, a lot of that was kind of, you know, added in later drafts to develop, but I don't know if it's a thing. I mean, I think it's a thing a little bit.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at, is it a thing with you maybe?
No, no, but okay, so there's a whole bunch of inspirations to this story. And one of the inspirations, actually there's like 5 things that you can, you know, like things that either I saw or things that happened to me that just kind of stuck around and I knew they'd come out at some point. So there was this woman who I knew who was very charismatic, like so fun. She worked with kids, so that's how I knew her. And she was like this dynamic woman that you were just drawn to. The kids were drawn to her. Everyone was drawn to her, not sexually, just like she total charisma. And then I kind of fell out of touch with her because my kids weren't, you know, they didn't have that sport anymore. And then I just find out like maybe a year or 2 later that she's been arrested for a serious crime. And so that made that started, you know, it was gonna come out like somewhere. Like, that's so crazy to think you know someone really well and then there's this complete other side of their personality, and they're like very charismatic and you know, everybody loves them and they've got this whole other side. And I mean, like, I'm already not that trusting of people in the first place, and then like things like that happen to me and I'm like, oh my God, can't trust anybody. So that was one inspiration to the book. So that is how that, you know, played out in my life. But then I added an actual relationship to it instead of just like, wow, there's this like really fun woman who's very charismatic and lovely to talk to, and my kids love her, to like it, you know, it's different in the book.
Well, that answers a lot. And so I'm reading testimonials and blurbs on your book from some really great authors. And one of my favorites, I thought to myself, it doesn't get much better than this. Somewhere between Ozark and Sharp Objects, there is Sharon Doering's Confess to Me. Get settled in for a long night of reading because you want to put this down. The second part's a little bit cliche, but the first part, I mean, what do you always get told? Blank meets blank in a blank kind of world, right?
Yeah.
But Ozark and Sharp Objects, 2 strong shows. That had to just like, bam.
Yes, I love that. I love that.
Samantha Downing, you know.
Yes, I mean, that was like such an awesome blurb from her. And as I'm pitching it with like Ozark and Sharp Objects. And I'm also, there was another blurb from the Daily Mail in the UK that said it would be appealing for fans of Tiger King. And I'm going with that too, because these are like really popular things. And, you know, at first when I heard like the blurb about Tiger King, I'm like, oh gosh, is that like a criticism? Like, is that a criticism? And I'm like, no, that show had like 65 million viewers. Like, I want those people.
Yeah. First of all, Tiger King is one of those anomalies that come along every once in a while. It literally is like watching a really bad accident. You want to turn away and you're like, oh my God, that's gonna, but you can't. You're like, oh, crash, boom, blood, splatter, ah.
Yeah.
Kind of like Tiger King.
I actually didn't watch it. I started watching it and I wanted to watch it with my husband, and he sat down for like 1 minute and he's like, nope, not interested. So I'm drawn to stuff like that, but not everybody is.
Well, there is some of the words that came out: irresistible, vicious, creepy. Oh, that's you.
That's me. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I didn't know if I was having a takeout order coming through or something.
We still have a landline.
What? What is that?
We paid like prepaid for years, like for this cheap Magic Jack. So we still have this landline.
Oh,
We don't use it.
okay. And we're
Sorry.
back. So irresistible, vicious, creepy, spellbinding. I'm going to add to that psychotic, but my favorite is wow, what a hell of a ride. So I just wanted to get out of that in case you needed another blurb from a very, very non-well-known author, self-published guy who does a little podcast who has like 6 episodes under his belt. You just really needed that kind of a thing right here.
Thank you. That means a lot. That means so much to me. I mean, it's like, you know, you get these emails and you get these messages from somebody who loved your book, and it's
Yeah.
like, that's it. It makes your day. Sometimes it makes your week. You know what I mean? It's like, because you do it, it's like you're doing it for yourself, right? Because you feel this urge to write and you need to write. But like, you know, as you're editing, you've got the reader in mind. And when a reader has a good time with your book, it's like, oh my gosh, that's the whole thing. That's the whole point, you know?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. You got this book to me just days ago. I was in the middle of a vacation with my family.
Sorry.
So I picked it. No, it's all good. I picked it up while I was vacation. I'm bouncing my brand new 6-month-old granddaughter, Allison, on this knee, fending off my 2-year-old grandson, Jack, who wants to have my undivided attention, loving all of that in beautiful Colorado Springs. And I'm going, honey, I've got to escape. I've got a little homework to do. So I'd sneak away for a chapter or two. But then I didn't pick it up again because I've got a few other things going on. And I literally, I promise you, hand to the sky. Thank you, Jesus. I woke up this morning about 4:30. I usually get up around 5:15, 5:30. And your book popped into my head because I'd gotten pretty close to the end last night. And I got this morning and I'm just ripping through pages. And here's my thing. This is one thing I loved how you did. And it's so hard to, one of the best compliments I think I can pay you is that I didn't see some of that coming. And so you're getting along closer to the end. You're like, oh shit, what? And those last handful of chapters.
Thank you so much. It's such a huge compliment. It means so much. It's yeah, the weird thing is that the weirdest thing is with writing this book, I was in a different place than writing my first book. My first book, I was in a complete bubble, no social media. It just wasn't my thing. I didn't know really any writers, wasn't talking to any writers.
Right.
So my first book, I mean, it has some like shocks in it, but that's not the main thing, is like these twists that you don't see coming. It's a buildup, because I don't personally need like a twist. I'm in it for the character, and I'm in it to see like how far you can stretch the character and how crazy that can get. But with the second book, I had gotten on social media because it had been mandated to me.
Why?
That by like agent, publisher,
Yeah.
like get on social media, like come on, you've been dragging your feet forever.
Yeah.
On social media. So it got on, and hearing, like being so connected to the actual readers and seeing the books that are coming out and what readers like about them. And it's like, wow, everybody loves twists, all these twists, and everybody wants to be totally surprised. I did not know that. Isn't that goofy that I didn't know that?
That is terribly goofy, Sharon. You're a goofball.
But I was in a bubble, but because that's not important to me to be like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. That was never important to me when I was reading. I don't know. But so anyway, so that informed this book, and I had already written like half of it. Then I got on social media. And so with like the second draft, third draft, I'm like, ooh, I gotta really please some like people who want surprises. So I just tweaked things to like ramp it up.
Well, mission accomplished. And Heather is in a real shitstorm. I mean, the way she is in and out of trouble. And then some of those last scenes, I thought to myself, this girl is going to start writing action thrillers before you know it, because you really do know how to create that cadence. But the multiple points of view, one of the points I wanted to make, at first it was kind of confusing. Multiple points of view, meaning chapter told by Heather, next one told by Trevor, her husband. At first, excuse my ignorance, I wasn't quite getting it. And then once I really kind of got into the characters, and then I really appreciated the fact that I was seeing the world through their eyes, I was like, oh, I read about that in writing class. And that's really an interesting technique. I haven't seen a lot of that. I know it's out there, but
Yes.
I really dug that. It was very cool. Multiple points of view.
The multiple points of view. Yeah, that's, I mean, that's another thing since getting on social media and seeing what people expect from psychological thrillers.
Yeah.
They really like that. And I mean, I actually like that too, to be able to like see something play out from these different points of view. And you get, I mean, it adds so much, you know what I mean?
Sure. Well, look at Girl on a Train. Remember when Paula Hawkins wrote that and everyone was like, what?
Yes.
The unreliable narrator, and all of a sudden you're like, what?
Yeah, that was amazing.
God. So wait a minute. So you love that. We all love that. But, and you knew that you liked it, but you didn't assume that all audiences like it. So really what you're saying is you were just like, oh, I needed to realize that, for lack of a better term, maybe I need to write a little bit more for what the audience is expecting. Is that kind of like what you're thinking?
Yeah, a little bit. Although I was lucky that I had written most of a first draft, I think, still in my bubble, because I think that would have messed with my head if all of a sudden I was just trying to write my second book and I was like too focused on what people wanted. That might have like led me astray. So I was still in my bubble, but then I was far enough along where it served me. It helped me. It didn't like, it didn't like screw me up or block my ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can say that Sharon Doering's life is pre-bubble and post-bubble.
Totally.
However, that way in like BC and AD, so you'd have PB. You can't have two PBs. We could put a jelly in there, I suppose. But anyway,
after bubble.
Yeah, there you go. Pre-bubble and after bubble. Okay. Post Dominus Bubblanius. So the dual. Here's the other thing I love: the dual voices in Heather's head. Again, a little confusing at first, but then I go, ooh, I like her schizophrenia. Traveling down dual paths. Yeah, she's a weird one. I mean, she's had like a really rough life. So she's got a lot going on and she's got to work through a lot of things. And she has all these, I mean, she's got a lot of relationship issues and a lot of secrets. So yeah, I mean, she was fun to write. The humor that you weave in and out of this, I probably got more kick out of that. The little side comments to self, one of my favorite things ever, because it's like you get to experience that person. Oh, is that how you feel? Yeah, I bet that's how you feel, you crazy bitch. Those kind of things. Love that stuff. And the way you do it is so concise, but I mean, I caught myself laughing out loud. It was, and I knew I was 100% certain you were hilarious in real life. Thank you. I think my family would disagree. My family would disagree, but I like dark humor, and I don't know, I like it in there. I mean, a lot of my favorite psychological thrillers have some humor in them. I just like that. Going back to my tab, this is a good time for tab number 2. And I thought to myself, she had to have made her editor proud, because you do this thing where you strip away all the extraneous words. And not only does it make you read faster, which is its own benefit for whatever reason, but you've seen those tests where you turn letters out of order, but you can read it your mind just automatically reads it. You don't really know how you can do it. You know what I'm talking about?
No, but that's okay.
Well, sometimes people will have these tests and they'll jumble the words and they'll write the sentence, and it's a test of intellect. If you can read it at the same speed with the words all out, the letters all out of order.
Yeah.
Okay, I won't. I do really well with that stuff. I don't know if it means I'm an intellectual. It could mean I'm psychotic. Let's stick with succinct. As darkness swallowed him, twigs snapped, first close, then farther. Dirt slipped, giving way, kicking loose and falling. Branches cracked, then a small splash. That right there, I mean, there's not a single extraneous word in there. And it painted this entire picture like that.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, right. Like when we're writing, we want to tell a good story, but we love the words, and the words are so important. So, I mean, and you pour your heart into the words and, and try to do, try to serve them, you know what I mean? And,
Sure.
And then as you're editing, I don't know how you do it. If you overwrite or underwrite, and then if you underwrite, you have to fill it in, or if you overwrite and then try to cut it down. But I do find myself overwriting and then trying to cut it down because I don't want to bog down the story. I want to just you know what I mean? So
Yes.
What do you do? What do you do when you write? Do you underwrite and then fill it in, or the other way?
Thank you for asking. I actually overwrite. What I will do is I try to get, let's start with a chapter. I try to write the chapter. I know what the chapter needs to feel like. I know where I'm going to the end of the chapter. And I try to write it relatively quickly, but I will be a little more floral with it, for lack of a better term. I'll add lots of different words just so that I'm painting the biggest picture, because I know exactly what I'm going to do tomorrow.
Yeah.
The next day, I will start the day. Let's just say I'm using one chapter. I'll start the next day with that chapter, and I'll go right then. I'll go, too many words, and I'll kind of trim that off. I won't massacre it, because I may still need some of that cush. And then I go on my merry way. Now, my last 3 books, my sister has a PhD in English. I hired her to be my editor for this, and
That's a handy relationship.
well, she's effing brilliant, and I mean brilliant, and she, oh my God, there's a couple of different things. Dangling participial phrase has been one of my nemesis, but she's taught me how to get out of that. But so I know that if I write this way and I trim the next day and I still have a little cush, then when I hand it to her, there's probably going to be a little more carving.
Yeah.
But I'm a fan of writing a little bit bigger than shorter, because I don't want to come back later and have to beef it up. However, now that I talk out of both sides of my mouth, listening to what you said earlier, there is a benefit after you get that done, that first draft, and then you go back and, like you said, oh, I want to go back in and add a little twist and a turn and a bump in the road. That is different, because that's just, I call it kind of like layering a cake. My wife makes this 7-layer cake, which is to die for. And she has, and you bake the basic cake and then you add a little bit more. So to that point, I kind of like that. That was a lot.
Yeah, there's always what is it? People say that like you add in all those things, like readers don't know that you add in maybe all these twists and red herrings, you add them in, and they think you knew what you were doing the whole time, when really it's like second, third draft, and you can make it flow where that, it's not choppy, where, but you really didn't quite know exactly what you were doing the first time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a reader might think,
Sure.
Yeah. So I have a question about your book.
Yes, dear.
So I've got your book, but I haven't started it yet. Am I supposed to read the first one first?
I would like to gently suggest that you do.
Okay.
Here's the reason. And look, I'm not assuming you will. I gave
Yeah.
that to you as a gift because
Yeah.
you've been so kind to me and gracious. You could read the second one as a standalone. I do build it so that if you're coming out of nowhere, you're going to be fine. However, I'm so stinking proud of the first one, which really sets the stage for who this character is. And that first one is perhaps infinitely more complex. And I think you would really enjoy it because it's so deeply layered and there are so many characters and it is more of a mystery than a thriller. However, you could call it a mystery thriller if you wanted to. My point being, there's so much going on and there's so much story and so much evolution of who Patricia Norelli is.
Yeah.
So that when you get to book 2, you've got all that history behind you and there's so many little questions answered for you.
I love that. Okay, I'm definitely going to read the first one first because I love that. I love when a writer is like, I am really proud of this. You know what I mean? Because it's like you pour your heart and soul into it. And actually, I was laughing with a friend about this because with Confess to Me, I'm like pitching it like, it's like, do you like Tiger King, Ozark? Like it's got mountain lions in it and there's some devil worship. So I'm like trying to like pitch it, in these, very like, just like catchwords, little things like that. But really, you pour yourself into it. You pour so much of yourself into it. And I was just laughing with a friend because I'm like, hey, devil worship. like no, like that's such a crazy transition when you're promoting your book, like something you pour your heart and soul into, and then you're switching over to the marketing and like trying to pitch it in these like really just shallow ways.
Well,
I'm sorry, I love when someone says they're so proud of what they wrote. I love that.
Well, thank you. And I got to tell you something. My next book, which I've just started, will be either my 9th or my 10th. I think it's my 10th because I said to myself on my 10th book, I told myself I would do 9 books, and on the 10th one, I would go after an agent for it because I figured 10 would probably cover roughly 10 years. Fills under the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours. The Hollywood takes 10 years to be a hit.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I've got my homework behind me, but I will say there's only 2 books of all of the books that I've written that I go, I am really, really proud of this one. One is another series that I wrote, which we don't have to go about, but that first one is The Poser because, and I just got interviewed by a group that they said, what made you choose a female protagonist? Why be a guy writing as a woman? I'm like, well, kind of like my entire career. If I didn't think I could do it, I wanted to see if I could. So I kind of proved it to myself that I could. And I had this idea of a character. I mean, I grew up with a strong mother, 2 strong sisters. I've dated strong women. I'm married to a strong woman. I like a strong, take charge woman. I don't, and the whole subservient suburban housewife never really was my thing. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool if you had a kick-ass broad? I'm being playfully irreverent. A kick-ass broad who grows up in a world of the male-dominated society, LAPD, with one brother who's a cop, judge as a father, but put her in that world and see how she deals with it. And so it's her very first case. I'll make this very short. It's her very first case. She lays it on her. She goes to her captain and says, look, just let me have this case. She just come in on from overnights. If I screw it up, fire me. No, I'll quit. So this is her proving ground, and she solves the crime. Or does she?
That's a good pitch. I love it. Yeah, I'm definitely going to read the first one first. So you're working on your 10th.
This upcoming will be my 10th book. Yeah.
And what, you've probably already covered your background. What made you write your first? Like, did you do like short stories like I did and work up to one, or did you just sit down and said like, I have this novel in me, I got to get it out?
Thank you for asking. It's really interesting. No,
I love
seriously.
to hear. I mean, it's like, right? Like when you're a writer, it's like such a solitary thing. You're kind of dying to know, like, what's it like for everybody else, you know?
Well, you're going to find this, I think you're going to find this hilarious, especially since we started the show with me talking about being on the radio. So what does a radio guy do? A radio guy entertains millions of people on a daily basis for 5 hours or 4 hours a day. Talk, play music, interview people, blah, blah, blah. I had a big team on all my stations in all the cities. And then all of a sudden, near the end of my radio career, I stepped into satellite radio, which is, you would know it as Sirius XM, but it was even a little bit more generic than that at the time. And so I was cruising on this show, not really very stimulating.
Okay.
And I had always been a closet writer. I would always jot down notes and just think of ideas, just constantly doing that and sticking them into a notebook. Here's the thing. So I worked the afternoon show, so everyone left at 5. So about 5:30, I'd go down the hall and pick up my secretary's IBM Selectric, go back in the studio and just sit there in between long riffs of music and just craft out short stories, because this brain, one side would do this without even thinking about it because I've been doing it for so long. But this brain needed some creativity.
Yeah.
If this side is bored, I'm going to do something with this side.
Yeah.
And so I just literally started banging out little 1-page, 2-page, 3-page short stories. And a lot of times, Sharon, it wouldn't even be a short story. It would just be like, I have an idea. It's a scene. What has become a chapter, because most of my chapters are kind of, I call it James Patterson-esque, because they're short and tasty.
Yeah. Yeah.
And which you're going to find out, because when you get to the imposter, that thing reads so fast, you'll go through it in a day. Yet I digress. So anyway, the point being,
No, I love it. I love it.
I slipped all those notes away and I stuck them into a notebook, and I just sat on it. I still have it here in the office. And so I met my wife years later. We're sitting in New York, getting ready to decide what to do next. And she said, what other ideas do you have? And I'm like, well, let me pull out my notebook of ideas. And she's like, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's interesting. Oh, hell yeah. Why don't you write this one?
Yeah.
Okay. That opening, it was an opening scene. It was chapter 1 or prologue. Was the opening scene. I sat and wrote it in one take. And it was the beginning of The Poser. That's
very cool.
Which is the book you're going to go pick up.
That's interesting that she played a role. Like when I read the different writing books, when I've read On Writing by Stephen King, numerous times, because it's such a good, entertaining read. And then it also like always had that underline. Have you read it?
Oh yeah, it's it's my Bible.
It has that underlying theme of like no shame. Like you just get serious with what you want to get serious, in your writing. And his wife like played this role throughout, like, no, you have to keep going with this one, so that's really interesting that it's similar for you,
Well, I'm going to go one better, because I know you have a little romance heart in you. I picked up on that. So my wife and I have a great love story. I'll tell you off camera a little bit later. But when we met in Manhattan, where we lived for the first year of us being together. And she said it was coming to a time for us to make a launch. And she said, if you could do anything, and this is a radio, TV background, acting, voiceover work, writer, director. She said, if you could do anything, what would it be? I'm like, writing. If I could just take 1 year and just give it 1 year, I'd go at it with everything I got. She said, do it. That's what you should do. She said, just go do it. And so I got to tell you, it's a lot due to her. And if you met her, you'd get it instantly. I mean, she's an amazing woman, and she said, you are made for this.
That's amazing. I love that story. I mean, yeah, that's so great. And that's also so interesting that, the writing came in there. Do you think a lot of actors and actresses want to write because they're so, like, it's so about the expression, self-expression and character, and like, so how complicated the character is, and like how snappy and sharp the dialogue is? Do you think a lot of them want to write?
Yes, and I'm seeing this more and more. Every time I turn on a podcast, I hear another celebrity writing a book. And I think it's a couple of very essential things. We're all storytellers.
Yeah.
Whether you like that phrase or you don't like that phrase, I've heard different discussions on it. We're hardwired to tell stories. So there's that. Second of all, especially if you've been an actor, I mean, what does an actor do? An actor oh, that's a note from my new friend. I'll pretend it's a script from Sharon, my bestie. It says bestie. Take the script, inhabit it, tell the story through your mind, through your eyes. So, you're going to color this piece of paper, the script, the character with who you are. That's great storytelling. Also, as a director, having directed films, I get to tell a story through the way I choose a picture, a scene, lighting, mood, score. So I think it's true. I think we're all storytellers. I think every single one of us, in some form or fashion, are storytellers.
That's lovely. It is super lovely. Yeah, no, I mean, I think, you're right, because when you read about, like, there's like a statistic, like, I think it's like 81% or something of people want to write a novel, right? So you're right. It's kind of like a lot of people want to do it. But I guess, like, I just was thinking, like, oh yeah, I mean, if you're an actor, you're really into like character and expression and, the workings of the mind, and, so I would think it's probably even higher than 81%, maybe, with actors.
I think so. And you know what I think is funny? I don't know how many times I've heard, and I know you've heard this too. How many of our friends around us, neighbors, friends, call them whatever, have said, oh, I want to write a book. I'm so going to write a book. Well, great. Get to it. Oh, well, maybe not today, but I'll start it tomorrow. So those people are not really writers.
I actually don't have anyone in my life who says a book.
Oh.
So maybe my circle is like super small, Midwestern circle. I don't know. Nobody's told me they want to write a book.
Oh, wow.
Or maybe I just don't have that many friends.
I have literally dozens of people who have said, oh yeah, I want to write a book. I'm like, well, do it. Well, yeah. I'm not really sure I know how to do it. I'm like, well, can you write a check? You can write a book. No, I'm kidding.
Nobody knows how to do it. I mean, even somebody who's written a bunch of bestsellers, they still sit down to, their blank screen when they're starting a new book, and they're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Right.
Why do you think that is? I mean, when you think about it, I think we're afraid that maybe we won't be as good as the last one if we feel good about the last one. Oh, I can't do that again. Well, why would you think you couldn't do that again? If you did it once, you can do it twice.
I think because it's such a journey. So when you're right at the start of the journey, you can't see how, like, you're going to make it so complex and so, multi-layered. And like, are you going to get the character enough, like all the different aspects of them? You just can't see because you're right at the start of it. So maybe like, as you're maybe like at whatever, 15,000, 20,000 words, you're like, okay, I can see this is going to work. But right at the start, you just don't have like much more than, some sort of minor game plan. I don't know.
Well, this is going to beg a discussion of plotter versus pantser. And my first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. First 5 books were all off the cuff. My mantra was, "Oh, I want to see what happens." By the 6th one, I'm like, if you had one of those days where you and the husband, or me and the wife, maybe had a glass or 2 extra of wine, and the next day when my alarm goes off at 5 and I'm sitting down at 5:15 and I'm going, if I've got an outline, I'm kind of ahead of the game.
Yeah.
P.S. You can call this a silly analogy. Would you get in the car with the husband and kids and say, "Hey, we're going to go on vacation. Where are we going?" "I don't know. We're just going to go."
Right.
Well, would you not have a map? Or if you don't use maps, you'd have a destination.
Yeah.
You'd at least know where you're going to end up. You might say to yourself, "Hey kids, let's play up a ear and we're going to go to, where would you go on vacation? Milwaukee? No. Traverse City. We're going to go over to, Traverse City in Michigan. Woo! Yeah, okay. Well, what are we going to do in between there?" "Oh, I don't know. Let's just freeform." Okay, that's one thing. But you wouldn't say, "Hey, let's just go cross country, not have any kind of a plan."
Right. Well, I think okay, so even when you're starting a book and you have this idea of a character and maybe what they're going to have to struggle with, and maybe what's going to happen in the middle, and you have a kind of a feel for maybe what could happen in the end, I think it's still scary when you're sitting down, because you just don't know if you can pull that all together into like this big thing, right? Because when people sit down to write a book with that blank page, they've got some, you know what I mean? Especially if they're a seasoned author, right? They've got some idea of what they want to happen, but you still don't know if you can pull it off.
I suppose there is a little trepidation, but I also spend, I've spent probably about 6 years thinking about this next book while I'm doing this other stuff. It'll be a germ of an idea, and I'll just marinate on it, and I won't force it. And I won't, what if what if it's this background? What if he came from here? And I'll do that, and I'll do that, and I'll do that.
Yeah.
And the reason this book is coming to me now, and I'm not going to go into great detail on it, but I've been reminded by 1, then 2, then about 3 people, including my wife, that said, "That's what you should do."
Yeah.
And because it's unique to me. And so again, based on marinating on it, that's where I'm going to go. But back to your real essential point. Yes, it is daunting to think of yourself doing 90 to 120,000 words. Yes, do you have hiccups along the way where you go, "I don't feel it today"? Yes, do you think, "Well, I have just the right red herrings and character development and enough twists and turns to keep the reader's interest"? Yes. However, you can only write a sentence at a time.
Yeah.
You're probably only going to write about a chapter a day, probably, maybe, unless you're on a roll. And then most importantly, and I'm going to research who your editor is, because I would love to pick their brain.
Her name is Sophie Robinson.
Okay.
She's in Titan, and so they're in the UK. And she was amazing. I mean, I don't know, so I don't have any other experience with any other editors, but it's like it's like anything. Every new experience you have builds you, and you learn a lot from it. So I learned so much from her. Like, should give me my first just like 2 pages of notes, nothing in the manuscript, but just ideas. Like, listen, you need to add a prologue, and this is what needs to happen. And then like this part of the character, no, you got to change that. You know what I mean? So these 2 pages of notes for both my books. I mean, you first read them and you're like, "No, I don't want it. I worked so hard. I don't want it to make these huge changes." But then you let it sink in and you're like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." Like, the notes somebody gives you on your book. And then as they go through, page by page, paragraph by paragraph, saying like, no, you need to add something about this here, or like, what happens in this chapter, like get rid of it. You know what I mean? It's kind of amazing. It's brutal, but I love brutal because it's making it better.
I was going to
you know
say, when you're getting pushed and you're straining to round off those sharp edges, you're getting better. And I
yeah
think to myself, the very first thing that popped into my head is you have to have a tremendous amount of trust in this person to not only really know what the hell they're talking about, but that they preserve your voice, respect your creativity, and third, nurture you as a person while still gently, velvet glove,
yeah
a velvet hammer kind of thing, going, knock these edges off, tighten this in. But trust me, if you do that, you're
yeah
going to be pleased. So would you agree with that?
yeah I think it's kind of amazing to be able to do that in a way that like doesn't make the writer just cry.
Sure.
So it's also, I think, a slow process. Like those first notes are just like, okay, I really love this. This is how I'm seeing it. And I don't like this part. I don't like this part of the character. You know what I mean? In that gentle way. And then once you turn that, and then they can kind of go and break down other things. And it's in a slow enough process that you're not just a wreck.
Sure,
But
sure.
also, and my editor did let me push back on one of the main parts of this book, where in the first draft, I mean, gosh, this book was so different in its first draft. And she's like, well, I don't see the point of this. I think you should just do this. And I'm like, wait, let me see. I get what you're saying, but let me see if I can pull it off. Let me do another draft and see, if I don't pull it off, okay, we can get rid of it, but I think I can pull it off. And then, after I did that work, she said, yeah, you pulled it off. You don't have to take it out. Because I mean, they are like the boss, right?
Well,
Like in a way, they're your publisher, and they're like, if they say like this whole aspect of the book isn't working, you need to do this. I mean,
well,
it's a
Sharon,
complicated relationship,
yeah, Sharon, think about this. If you're building a new house there in Chicago, out in the suburbs, and you go, hey, honey, husband, let's go build a new house. Okay, cool. Let's interview 3 guys. And the first guy, you ever built a house before? No, don't have any idea. Okay, next one. Yep, here's 50 that I built just this year, and I'm pro at it. Who are you going to go with? Yeah, probably the second one.
right,
Point
totally.
being, they're the specialists. They know the
Yeah
market. They know what works and what doesn't work. They've seen it all, and they respect your particular take and your voice on it. So yeah, I think it's counterintuitive not to trust them.
yeah. So I mean, so it is such an interesting relationship, and I really love my editor, and I think it would be really hard if you didn't like your editor. I think that would be hard, because you do have to trust them, and it's like, it's a pretty intense relationship in a way,
Well,
it's your
look at,
baby.
sure, yeah. Don't kill the babies. Would this be true? 3 major players in your world. I know there are tertiary, secondary. I got that, but your main one is your agent. Okay, their job, he or she, is to represent you to the market the best they can. They're going to find the best deal possible. Blah blah blah. Take care
Yeah
of you, etc. Probably going to be with you if you're happy a very long
yes
time.
yeah
It is in their best interest to do the best for you because it's the best for them.
yeah
Number 2 is your publisher. The publisher is going to print the book. They're going to help market the book. They're the machine behind it, right? So you got to have a good publisher, and you got to trust that publisher. And number 3 would be the editor. And if you don't have a good editor, or an editor that you trust and you respect, yeah, that would be a tough road, I would
yeah
imagine. But would you say those?
yeah I guess yeah, and you have to see eye to eye at least most of the time. You have to see eye to eye, because if you disagree with everything they say, then it's like, well, where are you? I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
so that is so interesting. So before they offered me a contract, she, we had a FaceTime call. Just, I think she was like feeling me out, like seeing like, am I difficult? Like, can she work with me? Right? Like, because if you're an editor, you want to see, like, is this author willing to change some of their stuff? I mean, who knows if she got that, like from my answers or whatever, but she probably, no, actually, I think I was pretty direct. And that I said, like, I'm willing to do whatever. Just please, I want to work with you, but
Sure.
so I mean, yeah, it's a big step for them too, for the editor. They're like, can I work with this author? And both ways,
Yeah. Uh, as we start to wrap things up, because you've
Yeah.
been so gracious with your time, and I don't want to eat up your entire day. I want to throw some random questions at you. It's
Okay.
kind of
I
coming
love
from,
random questions.
yeah, coming from my radio background, and they can be off the top of your head. There's these. It's not complicated, and it's not the number one. It's just like, what music do you write to? Do you write to music, or do you prefer silent environments?
I almost had a catastrophe.
I saw that. I just kept going.
um, okay. I love this question. I used to write to music. I don't anymore because even though I love it, it slows me down too much. So I don't write to music, but I can edit with music on.
Okay, excellent. Who is one of your favorite authors of all time, living or past? And if you could invite that person over for dinner, say with your husband, who would that be, and what would you serve or have served?
Okay, I think my two favorite authors are Stephen King and Gillian Flynn, and I would not want to have them over because I'm such a fan that I don't think I could relax. I think it would be better if we never.
Okay, okay. I've never had that answer. Fair enough. I love you from afar. Stephen, stay away. Just
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like it's very hard when you're such a crazy fan to even like start talking to them like they're a real person.
yeah. Okay, okay. Laptop or desktop, or pen and paper?
Laptop and pen and paper. If I need to be very creative in a short period of time, pencil and paper.
Okay.
Pencil, not pen, but pencil. If I'm like under the gun to write a new scene, pencil and paper is totally going to work. But typically I write on my laptop.
Okay. Let's say you and your husband get to ditch those three precious angels of yours for a long weekend, and you get to escape to a luxury island in the location of your choice. And you can take one book, one CD, and you're with your one, and you can enjoy your one favorite beverage for the entire holiday getaway. What's the book? What's the CD? What's the drink?
The drink is coffee. That one's easy.
Okay.
The book. Oh my gosh, isn't this a torturous question? Maybe Black House by Stephen King.
Oh.
I really like that one. And CD that I'd have to listen to over and over and over.
It's just a long weekend, so it's not like it's not that you're stranded on an island for 6 years.
Okay. Maybe like New Order or The Cure.
Oh, nice.
To listen to, if I'm going to listen to it quite a bit.
Solid choices. Okay. Final question. What's the single best piece of advice you would give any up and coming writer who's sitting here listening to this show or watching this show thinking, wow, Sharon Doering's got it. This book was great. I want to be her when I grow up. I want to live her life. What's the single best piece of advice you would give?
Stubbornness, perseverance, right? I mean, most writers, most of them, I mean, some of them get lucky, right? With like their first book or their second book. Most writers just have to just accumulate so much rejection before they get something that they wrote that's good enough for them to put out there or for somebody else to put out there, right?
Right.
So, I mean, you gotta just like be so stubborn when everyone's like, no, 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 to just keep wasting your time. you, you gotta love it, right? You gotta love that writing enough to just keep doing it, even though everyone's telling you no. So stubbornness is very useful.
You know what? I love that. I love that answer. I call it tenacity. You call it stubbornness.
Or pig-headedness.
Pig-headedness. That's good. Cougar-headedness, to reference your book, which we didn't get to Satan worship or cougars, but I'm going to leave that for the readers, because all I need to say is if you like cougars and a little dose of Satan worship, you're going to love this book.
Tiger King, Ozark.
Yeah. No, but here's all I'm going to say is that, you said you've got to, what did you say? You got to keep going as though it wasn't any good or it was boring. Or my point is, if you're going to if you really love the craft of writing, you're going to continue to hone it. There's going to always be a segment of the audience that doesn't like it. Big effing deal. There's going to be a section of your audience who loves it. And so I guess my point is, and this is just now coming to me in the last few days. It's not mind-blowing, but I'm thinking to myself, without minimizing it, because I don't want to do that, because I love this craft and I'm going at it as you with everything I've got. But at the end of the day, embrace yourself. It is just a story. It is just a piece of time that we've captured. It is just a show on Netflix that we're going to binge for a stack of chapters, and we're going to put it on the shelf and go on our way. It isn't this culmination of a life's work necessarily. Not to minimize it, but at the end of the day, it is entertainment.
Yeah, and I guess also if a writer has written something and they're so attached to it and they're getting rejection on it, the best thing you could do is start the next book, because you can always keep trying to put that one book out there, or just put it out there yourself. Whatever you want to do, you can do it. But if you move on to the next thing and you get some emotional distance from what you were working on, that you're always working on the next thing, that all those rejections, they don't hurt as much, because you're like, oh, another rejection on that book. Okay, that's okay. I'm working on this next book. You know what I mean? So I think also just work on the next thing, right? Because our first book we write that we think this is decent, there's so right after we're done with it, we're so emotionally attached to it. So you have to keep going, I think, to get some detachment. You have to emotionally detach yourself.
Absolutely. My very first book, I did get to have some nice success with it, because I turned it into a movie. But if I read it today,
that's lucky and very nice, right?
Well, it's part luck. I mean, Seneca said luck is when preparation meets, what's the word?
When preparation meets luck.
No.
When preparation meets.
Oh my God. Okay, it doesn't matter. I don't want to pull this down. Here's the point.
No. Success is when preparation meets luck.
No. Okay, now you're just gonna make me Google it. It's one of my favorite ones.
I know what you're talking about.
Okay, here's what it is. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity.
Oh, okay, yes. Okay, you're good. That's true. I mean, that's true. But I would say that most people, their first thing, it does, odds are, right? It's not going to happen.
No, and to finish that point, my first book, it was not very good. I mean, if I can't read it today, my wife likes it. My mother loved it. She's passed away. She loved it. It was very sweet, but it's not my thing anymore per se, and it was bad. Bad, 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 bad. The only reason it got made into a movie is because I raised the money and I directed it and produced it and acted in it.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm not going to leave it up to you. I'm going to go do it. So
Yeah, well, that's amazing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That
Yeah.
is amazing. An amazing accomplishment, an amazing thing that you were able to do that, you know?
Thank you. I'm very proud of it. So I'm not going to diminish it by not saying I'm proud of it. It's just that, it's not a thriller. It's a family drama.
Yeah.
And so forth. Okay. So you've been so fabulous. You are fabulous. Seriously. I sound like
Thank
a
you.
hairdresser. You are fabulous.
Wait, can I ask you a question first?
Yes,
What
please.
would be your island book, drink, and CD?
Oh, look at you. My book would be, oh my gosh, you know what it would, no, okay, I'm going to be fair because it's not brain surgery.
Yeah.
This is going to sound really crazy. And I don't know why this particular book, it just hit me right. It's called Gentleman's Hour by Don Winslow.
Oh my God, I've never read that, but I love Don Winslow.
Okay.
He's amazing.
He is, in my opinion, he's one of the greatest writers of all time.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I would agree with that.
This particular book is a quintessential amalgamation of detective, surfing, culture, subculture, mystery, great storytelling, multi-textured. I've read it now. I just read it again the second time recently, and it's nearly a perfect book. And there's so many that he's written that I love, but that's the first one popped in my head. The CD, oddly enough, I have it right here because I found it. No, that's not it. It is by Dave Brubeck, which is a jazz player, quartet. Dave Brubeck Quartet, and the album is Brandenburg Gate Revisited. So it's classical jazz.
Yeah.
Back in the heyday when Dave Brubeck was just kicking ass. And the drink would be, do I have to be sober or no?
You can drink whatever, it's your question.
No, that's right. That's right. Thank you for reminding me. I got to tell you what, I think it would be just a classic gin and tonic.
Okay.
Yeah, Hendrick's gin, low calorie fever tree tonic, double lime. It's just because it's summer and it's going to be an island, so it's going to be delicious and refreshing and hydrating.
That sounds like a really good vacation.
Yeah, as long as
I'm just thinking now. You've got me thinking about Don Winslow, and I've read a couple of his books, but I like The Power of the Dog. Really stands out, and I remember. Yeah, gosh, it's so wonderful. Like when I think about all the great books I read for the first time, oh my gosh, that was so much fun. Like reading my first Don Winslow book, reading my first like Dennis Lehane, my first T. Jefferson Parker. Like that's so fun. And gosh, Don Winslow is amazing. I haven't read him for a while.
Well, I'll tell you what, if I was going to recommend, let's just say I could recommend two books, and I've read them all. The Force is probably one of my favorites because it's about cops, and it's the underbelly of Manhattan. And number two was a compilation of short stories, which to me is the quintessential verbal buffet, intellectual buffet, because there's so many great stories. And when you go from story to story to story, each one is so vastly different. My favorite one in there is Crime 101. And it's a tiny little story, and it's a perfect story. But so read those.
I love that.
Yeah. Big fan. I gush probably a little bit too much about that. Sharon Doering, God, the book is Confess to Me, and I got to confess to you, I really loved it. Yes, thank you for that. You're about as delightful as they come.
Thank you. It was so nice to talk with you. I love listening to your voice.
Oh, well, I feel like I'm on the radio in Chicago again.
Yeah, I love it.
102.
It was so lovely to talk with you, and I can't wait. I can't wait to read your book. I love like how you talked about your book, but I'm going to read the first one first.
Okay.
I'm going to read the first one first. And thank you for having me.
Oh man, you were delightful. You really do. You're probably one of the most entertaining gals I've talked to, and it's so obvious. Yes, it's so obvious that you love the craftsmanship of writing. And oh, I didn't even ask you. Please tell all of our audience what is next.
Oh, I'm working on something right now. I'm like 60,000 words in, and we'll see what my agent says when I send it to her in like maybe 2 months. But I don't have a contract, so who knows what you never know. That's kind of a funny thing, because like this dream of getting, published by a publisher, it's like there's no guarantees. So like there could be no more contracts. So I mean, like you just like you write because you love writing, and who the heck knows. So I'm working on this book. I love it so much. It's actually my most plotted book. I mean, I usually have an idea, before I write a book, what a handful of things that are going to happen.
Yeah.
But this one is my most plotted, and I love it. It's dark humor, psychological thriller, standalone, and we'll see if anybody wants it.
Can I be first in line to read a copy?
I would love that.
Yeah,
That would be an honor.
Yeah, I would love that. Do you have a title? Do you have a working title, or is that you probably don't talk about the title yet?
I do have a title, but I don't want to talk about it.
Okay, fair enough. That's all good. All right.
It's secret.
Yeah, it's all good. Well, I don't know. I'm trying to remember. Did someone introduce us, or did I just find you?
It was May Cobb. It was May
Oh,
Cobb.
May Cobb.
Actually, she does not know this, but she played a role in what I'm working on, because The Hunting Wives is so beautifully written, right? I mean, she's a great writer. And
yeah,
it's such a good pitch, right? It's such a good pitch. So there's so many great books, but not all of them have a great pitch. They're just like, okay, this you got to read this book. It's really good. I can't describe it in one sentence, but just read it. But May Cobb's The Hunting Wives, that was like one of the best, pitchiest books I've read in a while, where, the writing was beautiful, the story was great, and oh my gosh, this elevator pitch. So I'm trying to write something that's a little more pitchy.
Well, you've just given one of the best pieces of advice. I picked this up at Thriller Fest back in 2019. By the way, plug to ITW. There's going to be a new one in New York in June of 22. And that is this. Your elevator pitch is so key, so essential, because of that very thing. If it's something that's been done to death, or people have heard before, or they say a phrase like, oh, I can't describe it, you should just read it and tell me. Just go do something else. Go bag groceries or something, because if you can't hone your book into a unique, flavorful, tasty, arresting elevator pitch, then what the hell are you doing?
Yeah. So I mean, that book is amazing with its pitch, right?
Yes.
I mean, it really the pitchiness of it is a standout. So that actually, I should tell May that. I haven't told her that yet. That's influenced me.
May,
but she introduced us.
She not only did she introduce us, she was the very first guest on this brand new Thriller Zone, which I launched. I was doing a show called Naked Monday, which I'll do periodically, but Thriller Zone really is the essence of what I want to talk about. So she was my very first guest. Unfortunately, sadly, she had just lost a friend.
Oh yeah.
So I couldn't see her. We didn't do a face-to-face. It was audio only, and I really wanted to come out of the gate with that. But I think so much of her, and I she's delightful to talk to. She's so kind, so gracious. The book is stunning. And it's going to be a TV show. It's either going to be a show or a series. I guarantee you.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, actually, I just remember the first time I was reading it, being like, oh my God, the movie, the movie, the show, whatever, it's going to be bought. The writing is beautiful, the story's amazing, but like that pitch, it's a standout.
And let's not shortchange you, Miss Sharon Doering, about somewhere between Ozark and Sharp Objects. That's a pretty dang good pitch.
That is a good pitch. I like that.
Don't you know?
I did not come up with it myself.
It's okay. It doesn't matter where it came from. It just matters that it's out there.
Yeah.
All right. Blessings to you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Sharon Doering, she's about as funny and as energetic and as talented as they come. What a great guest. And if you like psychological thrillers with a gaggle of wacky characters, then Confess to Me should be on your nightstand. Okay, super cool news. On next Friday's The Thriller Zone, not only is it episode 7, which happens to be my lucky and prime number, but we have a mega special guest. Let's see if you can guess. She's an Edgar-winning novelist whose bestsellers have been translated in more than 20 languages. She's born in Oklahoma City, raised in Santa Barbara, graduated from Stanford University, moved to London to begin her writing career, and this is after practicing law in Los Angeles and teaching writing at University of California, Santa Barbara. Any ideas? Okay, here's a giveaway. This will give it away. She's a 3-time Jeopardy champion. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the gal who brought you the Evan Delaney series, the Joe Beckett series, the Unsub series, none other than Meg Gardner. Yes, that Meg, the Dark Corners of the Night Guard. So watch this on YouTube, listen on any of your favorite podcast channels, and please share this on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you share. And always check back with us. But this is going to be a super special Friday. Until then, we'll see you on the Thriller Zone.